It's Monday, August 26, 2019. I have the pleasure to offer you a video. Actually, it's an excerpt from reliable sources which CNN presents every Sunday, and the excerpt will be two psychiatrists, one woman and a man. The female psychiatrist is from Yale, and the other one, the male psychiatrist, is from Duke University, I think. What are they talking about? Well, it's about our president. 2 points of view. It's not so much that they disagree, they agree essentially, as you will see. I don't want to give out too much, but their takes are from different angles. Okay, let me say a couple of words in Creole now. Vidéo m'a montré nous jodi a son extrait de une émission que CNN présentait tous les dimanches, que les reliable sources, des sources de nouvelles fiables qu'on a fait confiance. Bon, on a pris deux psychiatres, une femme avec un garçon. Une c'est la grosse université Yale, l'autre là c'est Duke University. Pourquoi? C'est pas tellement que deux psychiatres ça yo leur parlé de président Trump, yo pas d'accord. N'a pas vle bay trop information, mais yo ouais bah là des angles différents, des points de vue gens différents. Peut-être bon, m'pa vle bay trop. OK. Alors nous capables commencer la vidéo. Donc cette vidéo là se présente deux psychiatres dans le cadre de l'émission Reliable Sources que CNN présente tous les dimanches. Deux psychiatres, hein, un homme et une femme. C'est pas tellement qu'ils sont en désaccord en ce qui concerne le président des États-Unis, mais ils opinent de points de vue différents, sur des angles différents. Je ne veux pas trop dire de cette vidéo-là, alors allons-y. Vous aurez un plaisir à écouter, je suis sûr. D'accord.
But first, the story that's playing out every day on our TV screens and Twitter feeds. He's getting worse. We can all see it. It's happening in public. But it's still a very hard, very sensitive story to cover. I'm talking, of course, about President Trump, about his behavior, about his instability, the contradictions, the lies, the complete rejection of reality. Some prominent figures, including the husband of Trump aide Kellyanne Conway, are pleading with the press to take this more seriously. On Friday, George Conway said Trump is decomposing before our very eyes. He said, quote, Republicans need to face up to the fact that the president is mentally unstable and psychologically unfit. Now, Conway seems to think it's narcissistic personality disorder. Others have other concerns. Anthony Scaramucci is out there saying mental breakdown. What makes them so worried? Well, stuff like this. This summer has been chock full of examples. Trump making racist remarks about Baltimore, making racist comments about the squad, repeating ridiculous claims about voter fraud, denying things you can hear with your own ears, like calling Meghan Markle nasty on tape and then claiming he never said it. He's been bragging about his visits to hospitals in Dayton and El Paso. He did once mix up Dayton and Toledo, two different cities in Ohio. Then there's canceling a planned trip to Denmark over the Greenland dispute. And you remember back in June, he attacked Nancy Pelosi and Robert Mueller while at a World War II cemetery. He's been retweeting conspiracy theories about Jeffrey Epstein. The list goes on, but the list is necessary in order to cover the big picture of what's going on. Look, all of these stories are covered in the moment, individually, by reporters. News outlets use words there like erratic, volatile, unstable, but rarely are Trump's words and actions covered as a whole. Rarely do news outlets take it to that next level. Okay, what he just said seems crazy. What does that reveal about him? We rarely see it go to that next step. Now, I get the Trump opponents have been saying he's sick since before Election Day. I think some folks throw out terms like cognitive decline way too casually. They dream about the 25th Amendment. But it is possible to have a fully fact-based conversation about this. In fact, it's not just possible, it's necessary. Look at the New York Times this week reporting that some former Trump aides are, quote, increasingly worried about his behavior. Most people who cover this world for a living know that. I spent the week talking with major media figures at networks and newspapers. There is definitely a widespread recognition that Trump's behavior is getting worse in type and in frequency. It seems he's acting more erratic more often. I mean, calling his Federal Reserve Chair an enemy and comparing him to the communist leader of China, sending the markets into a freefall? Come on. Of course, the president is always going to have a choir to back him up, to rationalize the irrational, to make excuses, or to say, hey, he was just kidding. His Fox fans pretend that Trump's worst episodes didn't happen at all, or they blame the media for bad coverage. But let's talk about that coverage, everywhere but Fox. When you watch a broadcast nightly newscast, how often do you hear about just how far off the road Trump is? Not often enough. Yes, they do note the daily madness, but they rarely connect the dots between the freakouts. Now, I do think CNN and MSNBC are better about putting the ugly reality right front and center in banners and in stories, but there's not really a vocabulary for this. There's not really a format for covering it. I mean, look, it's comfortable and natural to lead a newscast with, say, Trump wanting to buy Greenland. We have a format for that. We know what to do. We know what to put in the banner. We know how to do it. It's a lot harder to cover concerns about the president's well-being because it's really a series of questions that no one is able to answer. Why does he make it all about himself, even after, for example, visiting a hospital after a massacre? Why does he lie so often? Is there a method to the madness? Or is something wrong? Is he suffering from some sort of illness? It's questions, and then just more questions. No satisfying answers. And here's what happens every time. Take Meghan McArdle's newest column for the Washington Post. She says, I'm not Trump's doctor, and I don't know what's wrong with him. There's that understandable aversion to diagnosing someone off the TV. And that aversion sometimes shuts down these conversations. But McArdle said she doesn't need a diagnosis to know she should be worried. And maybe that's the point. Here's James Fallows making a similar point for The Atlantic, saying if Trump were a CEO or an airline pilot or in virtually any other position of responsibility, action would already be underway to remove him from that role. So something's wrong. There are lots of theories about what it is. There are some doctors who think they know. There are others who say we shouldn't speculate. There are ethical questions about even having this conversation at all. But we can't tiptoe around it anymore. We've got to talk about this. So let's talk about it. Let's do it. Let me bring in two guests, two psychiatrists with differing views about this. Dr. Bandy X. Lee is a professor at the Yale School of Medicine. She co-authored and edited the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. Originally came out 2 years ago. She started this conversation in many ways about Trump's mental health. And Dr. Alan Francis is in Philly for us. He's a professor emeritus and former chair at psychiatry at Duke University Medical College. And he authored the book, Twilight of American Sanity. A psychiatrist analyzes the age of Trump. So, Dr. Lee, first to you. You have been trying to sound an alarm for the past 2 years about the president's fitness. Has the press been listening to what you and your colleagues have been saying?
Not at all. I feel that the press has actively tried to shun us, especially the New York Times editorial that seems to have been published in collaboration with a past APA president. And I've been very concerned about the fact that the American Psychiatric Association has been working as pretty much as an agent of the state to modify...
To stop people from talking about this issue?
Yes, I'm speaking of the new, what many of us have started to call a gag rule. They have modified the original Goldwater rule, which I'm a staunch supporter of, into an order that allows for no exception, and it basically says that we're not just allowed to diagnose, but say anything of any kind in relation to a public figure. Here's what the original Goldwater rule says, that psychiatrists have a responsibility to society as well as to patients, and we are expected to contribute to activities that improve the community and better public health. And so when we're asked about a public figure, we should educate the public in general terms, just not diagnose.
Right, without saying, I'm diagnosing, because you've never met the man.
Exactly.
You can describe what you're seeing. So Dr. Francis, I know you disagree with this view that Dr. Lee and a couple other dozen psychiatrists have published in this book. You say it's dangerous to be talking this way. Why?
Well, I think that medicalizing politics has three very dire consequences. The first is that it stigmatizes the mentally ill. I've known thousands of patients. Almost all of them have been well-behaved, well-mannered, good people. Trump is none of these. Lumping the mentally ill with Trump is a terrible insult to the mentally ill, and they have enough problems and stigma as it is. The second issue is that calling Trump crazy hides the fact that we're crazy for having elected him, and even crazier for allowing his crazy policies to persist. Trump is as destructive a person in this century as Hitler, Stalin, and Mao were in the last century. He may be responsible for many more million deaths than they were. He needs to be contained, but he needs to be contained by attacking his policies, not his person. It's crazy for us to be destroying the climate our children will live in. It's crazy to be giving tax cuts to the rich that will add trillions of dollars to the debt our children will have to pay. It's crazy to be destroying our democracy by claiming that the press and the courts are the enemy of the people. We have to face these policies, not Trump's person. Now, it's absolutely impossible. You can bet the House that the Congress, that Pence, that the cabinet will never, ever remove Trump on grounds of mental unfitness. That will never happen. Discussing the issue in psychological name-calling terms distracts us from getting out the vote. And the important thing is to get Trump out of office.
I'm talking about asking questions that are really uncomfortable. I'm not saying we have the answers. I'm saying we need to bring it up.
Well, the problem is that the diagnoses offered have been amateurish. They don't apply to Trump. They will never get Trump out of office. And I'm worried that in dealing with the psychological motivations and the inaccurate psychiatric diagnoses, we lose the focus on getting out the vote. And that's much more important at this point.
So, Dr. Lee, your response?
First of all, I'd like to clarify that I have never diagnosed. In fact, I have always emphasized dangerousness over diagnosis. Dangerousness is about the situation, not the person. Mr. Trump, as a private citizen, would not be such a great danger. I also object to the moral attribution that Dr. Francis is giving. Those with mental illness are no different than the general population. Some are good, some are bad. And in fact, mental pathology is defined by destructiveness. Whether one is destructive toward oneself or against others, it is something we need to treat and address.
So your advice to the press, to outlets like CNN and NBC and others that are trying to cover Trump, what's your advice?
My advice is consult us. There are now thousands of mental health experts who are eager to speak beyond belief. In fact, they have formed a professional organization called the World Mental Health Coalition and made me president. People can go to the website, dangerouscase.org. We started on an ethical basis. I held an ethics conference at Yale to speak to discuss the gravity of speaking up. And after that, we collected the essays of 37 of the the most renowned psychiatrists and mental health experts from around the country. And that's how the book came about. We are not trying to medicalize politics. We are trying to meet our professional responsibility to society.
And Dr. Francis, your advice for the press? How do you feel the press should be handling this situation, these ongoing questions about the president's health?
Well, the problem is I thought the book was really silly. The people most willing to offer diagnoses know the least about it, have never contributed to discussions about diagnosis. There's absolutely no doubt that Trump is dangerous. Everyone knows that. Everyone should have known that before the election. The question is he dangerous because he's a bad, evil con man, or is he dangerous because he's mentally ill? And on that issue, I think that it's very clear he's dangerous because he's evil. He's not dangerous because he's mentally ill. And the mentally ill argument, if it would get him out of office, I'd say go with it even if it's inaccurate. Anything to get this man out of office. But it won't work. So piling on inaccuracy, stigma, the press will be getting people who know nothing about psychiatric diagnosis spouting off at the mouth. It won't add to the discussion. It will distract from the political stuff. And we have to focus on how evil are the policies and how important the election.
About connecting the dots between all of these ridiculous things that happen every day. And my fear is that people are just a little bit too afraid to say, whoa, this is a problem. There's something wrong here when he's attacking his Federal Reserve chair, misspelling the guy's name, and doing 50 of those things a day, kind of grasping for the language to use around this. But it's sensitive. I hear that it's complicated.
I think I have better language. I think Trump is best characterized as a spoiled brat, as a baby having temper tantrums, as a completely unfit person, unable to meet the challenges and the responsibilities of his office, as a con man, as the most narcissistic person maybe in our time, and a narcissist for all times. All of these as a thief, as a corrupter of others, as a obstructor of justice, of evil, and also stigmatizes the mentally ill.
Dr. Francis, thank you. Dr. Lee, quickly, last word to you.
I'd like to call out that Dr. Francis has diagnosed. Saying that someone does not have narcissistic personality disorder is also a diagnosis. And I don't believe that there's a need to dualize everything. I believe that what you said is actually very important, that we need to connect the dots. One does not have to be one or the other. Someone can lack the capacity as well as be criminally minded. I have pointed that out in a number of interviews. And it does not have to be only a personal problem. We're not concerned about Mr. Trump's personal mental health. We're concerned about his effects on society. And political people are asking questions about mental health. Mental health people are wondering about the political process. It's about time for a conversation, I would say.
Dr. Lee, Dr. Francis, thank you both. I'm grateful to have you both here today.